Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Dr. Karan Shazad, and today our first class is about what is discourse analysis. So, in order to understand what is discourse analysis, we need to understand the definition of discourse. Okay, so we have got two words, that is discourse and then analysis. So, it means that we are going to analyze the kind of discourse that we are studying. Okay. So I have gathered some of the definitions for you, and I would like that you should also share some of the definitions so that I should be able to explain to you the kind of definition that you are sharing. So the first definition that I have got here is, it is stretches of language perceived to be meaningful, unified and purposive. This definition is given by Cook, 1989. Stretches of language perceived to be meaningful. It means that discourse is not just one word. It is more than a sentence. It is above the level of a sentence. It is usually a stretch of a language. Stretches of language which are unified and which are meaningful. Okay, it means they have to give some meaning to us. Okay, so stretches of language perceived to be meaningful. It means it has got certain meaning in it. Later on, I will be talking about one of the models which is known as speaking, S-P-E-A-K-I-N-G. Okay, so it has got 8 letters, and I will be explaining these 8 letters. And this model is given by Hines. So for a discourse to be a discourse, it should have all these 8 characteristics. It means it should be a speech, and there should be a context, there should be some participants, there should be a communicative goal, there should be certain communicative acts. Okay, there should be a communicative key. I stands for instrumentality, N stands for norms, and G stands for genre. So I am going to write it here. So that is context, participants, ends meaning goals, acts meaning communicative acts, K key communicative key, I instrumentality, N norms, and G genre. These are the 8 characteristics, okay, which are supposed to be there in a discourse. I will be talking about some of the other features and characteristics of discourse later on. For example, most of the time people will say that discourse should be coherent, it should be cohesive, it should have a purpose. So usually when we interact, we human beings, when we interact, we always have got certain goals, certain ends that we want to fulfill. For example, my goal is to understand this subject, to get good grades and get the degree in the end. So we all have certain goals and purposes. Without those goals and purposes, we do not talk. Okay? So again, I refer back to the definition, that is stretches of language perceived to be meaningful, unified and purposive. It has to have a purpose. It has to be unified, cohesive and coherent. It has to be meaningful. There must be some new information in it, something new in it, so that we should understand, so that we should get some information, some knowledge. If knowledge is there, information is there, meanings are there, if the sentences are unified, they are talking about the same topic, if there is some purpose, that is discourse. Do you have any other definition of discourse with you?
Yes, sir. Discourse analysis study the ways sentences and utterances in speech go together to make text and interaction, and how these texts and interactions fit into our social world.
This is another very comprehensive definition of discourse. It is talking about context, and in Hind's model, I have already talked about context. Okay? Later on, context will be explained in detail. So, context can be social, and we can have religious context. Religion is part of the society. Cultural context. Culture is also part of the society. Okay? But linguistic context as well. Linguistic context, meaning the kind of words and sentences which are coming before that particular sentence, and the kinds of words and sentences which are coming after that particular sentence. They provide you with a linguistic context. So, language is always spoken, always used in society. It is influenced by the society, and sometimes it influences the society. So it is reciprocal, vice versa. Okay? So discourse influences the society, and sometimes society influences the discourse. If somebody is very powerful, maybe he or she is a political leader or a religious leader, and people believe in him, people would like to listen to him, so then that person, he or she, can influence the society. The kind of discourse that he or she is producing, it can influence the mind, the ways and means, the behavior, attitude of the people. And if sometimes the society is very powerful, some group in the society is very powerful, so they can also influence your speech. You know with whom you are interacting, keeping in mind the kind of person you are interacting with. You know, reshape or you shape your discourse that you are producing. So this is a very comprehensive definition of discourse that Fatma has just shared. Do you have any other definition of discourse?
Yes, sir. Discourse is actually a language beyond the sentence or the pattern of language across the text, whether it is social or cultural.
Going beyond the sentence. So of course, just where the sentence ends, usually we say linguistic ends. Linguistic starts with words. Okay, words when they are put together, we get a phrase. Phrases when they are put together, we get a clause or a sentence. Okay, but going beyond the sentence, talking about the culture, talking about the social context, talking about the role of the participants, that how they are interacting, what kind of relationship they are enjoying, because we interact keeping in mind the kind of relationship we are having with the other person. Then we interact with the person. And this is how, we continue with our talking. This is how we keep on producing the kind of discourse that we want to produce. Okay? So patterns of language, of course, across the text, this is the another clause that has been added here. Patterns of language means that there are certain commonalities, similarities. People, they have their own styles of writing and speaking. So sometimes they produce different kinds of sentences from the sentences that I am producing. So those patterns of language, when they are put together, when you are trying to analyze them, so those patterns of language, they will tell you something about that person. They will tell you something about that particular society in which that discourse is produced. So patterns of language, stretches of language, which are supposed to be meaningful, unified, and purposive. Any other definition?
Verbal interchange of ideas, especially conversation, formal and orderly, usually extended expression of thought on subject.
Extended thought on a particular subject. So she has given another perspective where again people are involved. And people, they have got their own mindsets, their own thoughts. And accordingly, of course, when we produce discourse, okay, all these things are there. Orderly. It has to have some order. It should not be a hodgepodge. So usually speakers, when they interact, they come prepared and they know what is their topic, and on a particular topic they speak, and then they produce discourse. For example, a religious scholar in the mosques on a Friday prayer, he comes prepared. He knows the kind of topic that he is going to talk about. So he talks about on a particular topic and he produces the discourse which is in order, which has got sequence, and participants are there, meanings are there, context is there. Okay, so let me read some other definitions. Is there any other definition that you have got? So,
Discourse analysis is a general term for a number of approaches to analyzing written, spoken, sign language use or any significant semiotic event.
yeah. So discourse is not just spoken. It can be spoken. It can be written. It can be a sign language, or it can be a combination of all these three. For example, we call it e-discourse. Usually we come across this e-discourse on the internet, and we have another approach to analyze this discourse, that is called multimodal discourse analysis. So discourse, in conclusion, I would love to say that it can be spoken, it can be written, or it can be e-discourse. It should have participants, it should have context, okay? It should have some meaning, it should be unified, it should have some purpose that you want to achieve, okay? And then communicative key, instrumentality, whether it is written, spoken, or e-discourse, norms, because discourse is always produced keeping in mind the norms, where you are living, the values, the kind of values that you are having. So Pakistani society is a different society. We have our own culture, we have our own values. We know how to interact with the teacher, how to interact with the father, how to interact with the mother. What is our relationship with the other person? And the kind of dresses that we are wearing. All these things are part and parcel of discourse. We produce discourse keeping in mind the values, the norms of the society in which we are living. And lastly, there is a word genre. G stands for genre, which means kind. So sometimes you are producing a letter, sometimes you are writing a research paper, sometimes you are producing a thesis, sometimes it's a classroom lecture, sometimes there is a sermon in the mosque, sometimes there is speech. So all these things, they have got their own modalities, their own norms, their own internal and external structures. Okay, so in genre studies later on, I will talk about the internal and external structures. But for example, you must have read composition, essay writing. We have got introduction, we have got body, we have got conclusion. So this is the structure. So genre provides us with structure, and we structure our speech, we structure our writing, keeping in mind the values, keeping in mind the genre in which we are writing. So in the end, I would love to say that today we have discussed some of the definitions of discourse, okay? And we have tried to understand that discourse can be spoken, can be written, or e-discourse, okay? And it should have context, it should have participants, it should have meaning, purposes, goals, okay? And then there has to be instrumentality, norms, and genre. Thank you very much.